This chapter introduces the discovery of a lost WWII submarine and situates it within the context of the final years of the war. It sets the stage for understanding the strategic, technical, and human environment in which such submarines operated, while creating a subtle hook of curiosity about what was found inside. In the closing years of the Second World War, naval warfare had evolved into a contest of technology, strategy, and endurance. Submarines were no longer peripheral instruments of surprise. They were central components of naval operations capable of altering supply lines, gathering intelligence, and shaping the course of entire campaigns. For the Allies and Axis alike, the ocean had become a domain of constant vigilance, silent threats, and invisible peril. Among these vessels, German U-boats had achieved a level of infamy. They were conceived as sleek, formidable, and efficient, designed to operate beneath the waves for extended periods. These submarines carried crews whose daily lives were dictated by confined spaces, mechanical complexity, and an ever-present specter of depth charges. Every journey submerged the crew in a liminal world, neither land nor surface, neither safety nor certain danger, a place where the routine and the extraordinary coexisted in equal measure. The discovery of a long-lost WWII submarine, now lying on the seafloor, evokes precisely this duality. On the surface, it is an object of technological interest, a relic preserved by cold water and sediment, a testament to the engineering of its era. Beneath the surface, it holds the potential to illuminate human experience under extreme conditions. What transpired within its steel hull is at once ordinary and extraordinary, a record of labor, anxiety, camaraderie, and tension in the final months of a global conflict. Submarines like this were operated under strict discipline. Every man had a designated duty, every maneuver was calculated, and every dive and surfacing was an exercise in coordinated timing. Food, air, and fuel were rationed carefully. Life below decks demanded obedience to procedure and the quiet endurance of discomfort. Any deviation could result in disaster. In these conditions, small conflicts or accidents had outsized consequences. Morale, ingenuity, and resilience were as vital as torpedoes and engines. Historical records indicate that losses at sea were frequent. Submarines vanished without notice, leaving few traces beyond reports filed in naval archives. Entire crews disappeared beneath the waves, sometimes for weeks, sometimes forever. Such losses contributed to the aura of mystery surrounding these vessels, their locations unknown, their stories incomplete, their fates often reconstructed from fragments of intelligence. Survivor testimony, or post-war investigation. The submarine, discovered, now lies at a depth that has preserved it unusually well. Pressure, temperature, and the absence of light have slowed corrosion, allowing structural details to remain visible. Hatches, torpedo tubes, and control panels remain largely intact, offering researchers a rare opportunity to study a wartime vessel almost as it existed at the moment it sank. Yet while the submarine's form may be intact, it carries within it traces of a more complicated and disturbing human narrative. Crew logs, if they survived, would have recorded routine activity, navigational decisions, encounters with enemy vessels, and the minutiae of daily life at sea. These documents provide context, though they seldom capture the full reality of human experience under confinement and threat. Beyond the written records, the physical space, narrow passageways, crowded sleeping quarters, and the machinery that demanded constant attention testifies to the endurance and precision required to operate such a vessel. The submarine itself is a silent witness, preserving evidence of events that unfolded in darkness. The moment of discovery is framed by technological advances in underwater exploration. Modern sonar, remotely operated vehicles, and submersibles allow researchers to examine the submarine in detail without disturbing its interior. This careful approach ensures that the vessel can serve as a historical artifact, rather than a site of speculative interference. Yet the question persists: what, precisely, does it reveal about those who occupied its compartments during the war? This is the subtle hook of curiosity that underlies the discovery, the tension between object and experience, between the preserved structure and the human reality it contained. The submarine's operational history provides further context. Missions were undertaken with calculated objectives, disrupting supply chains, intercepting enemy convoys, or engaging in reconnaissance. Each story carried risk, amplified by the limited intelligence available, mechanical unreliability, and the evolving tactics of adversaries. Crews operated within a framework that combined technical knowledge, learned procedures, and improvisation in response to unforeseen conditions. The consequences of success and failure were immediate and often fatal, underscoring the high stakes of submarine warfare. Equally important is the environment of secrecy and restricted communication that defined submarine operations. Commands were executed without immediate oversight, and reports were transmitted in carefully coded formats. The isolation of the vessel amplified both operational autonomy and vulnerability. Within this context, the submarine became a microcosm of war, a controlled space, yet one in which unpredictability remained ever present. The discovery of the submarine now allows historians to examine, with unprecedented precision, the interface between human endurance and wartime technology. Every control lever, gauge, and bulkhead provides insight into operational practices. Every compartment hints at the rhythms of daily life under sustained stress. The vessel's layout, equipment, and preserved conditions serve as both documentation and silent testimony, bridging the gap between archival records and tangible experience. In considering what may be found inside, the historian must balance expectation with restraint. There is potential for insight into logistics, habitability, and morale, as well as the grim realities of wartime exigencies. Observations may include the state of equipment, stowage of provisions, or arrangement of personal effects, each contributing to a broader understanding of the submarine's operation. Importantly, these findings must be interpreted with reference to historical context rather than contemporary assumptions, preserving the integrity of the narrative. This initial chapter establishes the framework for understanding the submarine as both artifact and historical witness. By situating it within the operational, technical, and human dimensions of WWII naval warfare, it prepares the audience to examine the complexities revealed upon exploration. The vessel's discovery is not merely an event, it is a portal into the lived experience of those who served aboard it, constrained by circumstance, committed to duty, and subjected to the unforgiving nature of the sea and war. The subtle hook arises naturally from this framing. The audience is invited to consider what the submarine may reveal, not through sensationalism, but through careful observation and historical inquiry. It is a question rooted in curiosity and the search for knowledge, a tension that will unfold in subsequent chapters. This chapter explores the structural, operational, and human realities aboard the submarine, detailing how isolation, hierarchy, and wartime pressures transform the vessel into a space of constant tension. It deepens understanding of the conditions that shape crew behavior and foreshadows the discoveries found inside the wreck. Life aboard a WWII submarine was defined by compression in every sense: physical space, social interaction, and psychological endurance. The vessel's interior was compact, with narrow passageways linking tight compartments that each served a precise function. The engine room thrummed with mechanical energy. The control room was lined with instruments requiring continuous monitoring. The torpedo bays were densely packed with weaponry maintained under strict protocol. Every surface, lever, and panel existed not only for efficiency, but for survival. Crew members were assigned roles according to skill and experience. Officers directed navigation, propulsion, and attack procedures, while enlisted men executed essential mechanical, operational, and maintenance tasks. This hierarchy was absolute. Disobedience, even when minor, could endanger the entire crew. Discipline, therefore, was not merely a formal requirement, it was existential. Isolation amplified these demands. Submerged for days or weeks at a time, the crew operated with no external contact except coded radio transmissions, which were intermittent and constrained by operational security. There was no relief from the environment of the submarine, no sunlight, no fresh air beyond filtered circulation, and a constant awareness of potential danger from depth charges, mines, or enemy vessels. The vessel itself became a closed system of function and anxiety where every movement had consequence. Daily routines were strictly regimented. Shifts were organized to maintain operations continuously with rotating watches for navigation, propulsion, and lookout duties. Meals were simple and rationed. Sleeping quarters were crowded and often shared by multiple men in confined bunks. Hygiene and personal space were severely limited, and the crew learned to adapt to discomfort as an unavoidable aspect of service. These conditions fostered both camaraderie and tension, a duality that defined social life aboard the vessel. The structural design of the submarine contributed to both efficiency and psychological strain. Bulkheads separated critical areas, ensuring compartmentalized operations in case of flooding or mechanical failure. Hatches, valves, and escape routes were controlled meticulously, and each emergency protocol was drilled repeatedly. Despite these measures, every dive carried risk. Structural failure, miscalculations, or external attack could transform routine activity into disaster in seconds. Hierarchy extended beyond operational command to the distribution of resources. Air quality, battery usage, and torpedo readiness were monitored closely, with officers making decisive judgments about risk and conservation. These decisions, while technical, also had human consequences. Crew members relied on the competence and judgment of superiors to survive, creating a dependency that reinforced authority and shaped interpersonal dynamics. Tension was exacerbated by the inherent uncertainty of submarine warfare. Even when no immediate threat was apparent, every creak of steel, shadow, or sonar ping could signal danger. The unknown was constant. The location of enemy vessels, the reliability of the craft, the endurance of fellow crew members. This environment made routine tasks psychologically loaded, as even minor errors could lead to catastrophic outcomes. The submarine's interior also contained traces of the crew's personal lives, small markers of individuality within the collective system. Stored letters, personal effects, and carefully packed provisions suggested both attachment to the outside world and the need to maintain morale under extreme conditions. Such artifacts, preserved in the wreck, provide a direct connection to the human experience behind the operational fluid. Operational orders were executed within this context of pressure and confinement. Each mission had strategic objectives: to disrupt enemy supply lines, gather intelligence, or engage in direct combat. Achieving these goals demanded precision and coordination. Yet the unpredictable nature of the sea and enemy action meant that even successful maneuvers could carry hidden consequences. Decisions taken under stress affected not only mission success, but the daily survival of every individual aboard. Emergencies were frequent, though rarely chronicled in official records. Fires, mechanical malfunctions, and flooding presented constant threats. Responses required technical skill and disciplined execution. Even when resolved, these incidents left traces, repaired bulkheads, scorched panels, or makeshift adjustments, evidence of both resourcefulness and risk inherent in submarine operations. The human dimension of confinement extended to interpersonal relationships. Close quarters necessitated cooperation, but also generated friction. Stress amplified minor disagreements, and hierarchical pressure magnified consequences for perceived insubordination. Officers maintained authority through both formal protocol and constant vigilance, understanding that the cohesion of the crew directly impacted operational safety. Within this tightly controlled environment, the concept of privacy was nearly non-existent. Sleep, work, and recreation all occurred in shared spaces. Every sound, movement, and gesture carried meaning. Yet the crew developed routines and subtle codes to navigate this surveillance, balancing the need for obedience with small assertions of individuality. By the time the submarine was lost, these conditions had already defined the experience of those aboard. The wreck preserves evidence not only of the vessel's technical design, but of the constrained, highly ordered world of its crew. Every feature, the layout of bunks, placement of machinery, and arrangement of personal effects reflects a culture of endurance, skill, and adaptation under relentless pressure. This chapter establishes the framework for understanding the internal reality of the submarine, moving beyond its status as a historical object to reveal it as a lived environment. It provides context for interpreting what was discovered inside. The preserved hull, equipment, and personal effects are artifacts of routine, authority, and confinement, rather than anomalies or sensational curiosities. By examining the interplay of hierarchy, discipline, and environmental constraint, the audience gains insight into how ordinary men operated within extraordinary circumstances. The tension and endurance that defined daily life aboard the submarine set the stage for the discoveries and revelations detailed in the following chapters. This chapter examines how the environmental, mechanical, and operational pressures aboard the submarine escalated the risks faced by the crew. It highlights the cumulative effect of confined spaces, extended missions, and wartime conditions that shaped both the vessel's function and the human experience within it. The submarine's environment was defined by constant pressure, both literal and figurative. Beneath the waves, every descent increased the external water pressure, compressing the hull and testing the limits of engineering. Steel plates, valves, and seals were designed with precise tolerances, but even minor damage or miscalculation could compromise the integrity of the vessel. Every dive, every maneuver carried the potential for mechanical failure, flooding, or catastrophic collapse. The physical forces of the sea were a persistent, inescapable threat, and the crew operated in continuous awareness of them. Mechanical systems were under continuous strain, engines required constant maintenance, batteries needed careful monitoring, and torpedoes demanded precise handling. Failures were not hypothetical. They could be fatal. Crews learned to diagnose and repair equipment under extreme conditions, often while submerged, with limited visibility, and under auditory stress from the thermal machinery echoing through metal compartments. Every task, from adjusting ballast tanks to maintaining navigation instruments, was conducted under a constant calculus of risk. Operational demands compounded these pressures. Missions were often extended far beyond planned durations, limited by fuel, provisions, and air supply. Navigation required meticulous attention to charts, sonar readings, and enemy patrol patterns. Small errors in judgment could result in detection, interception, or loss of the vessel. Command decisions were executed in a compressed time frame, with limited opportunity for consultation or correction. The margin for error was minimal. Isolation intensified psychological strain. The crew existed in a world where the surface was distant and the external environment hostile. Communications with command were infrequent, leaving the vessel to operate largely autonomously. This autonomy created both responsibility and stress. Every decision carried amplified consequences. Morale depended on disciplined routines, confidence in leadership, and the cohesion of the crew under high-pressure conditions. The physical layout of the submarine contributed to cumulative risk. Compartments were densely packed, with machinery occupying much of the available space. Narrow passageways limited movement, making rapid evacuation nearly impossible in emergencies. Torpedo storage areas, engine rooms, and control stations were interdependent. Damage or malfunction in one section could affect the entire vessel. The crew learned to navigate these risks through training, coordination, and experience. Escalation of peril was not limited to operational or environmental factors. Enemy forces, aware of submarine tactics, deployed depth charges, mines, and coordinated patrols. Detection was a constant threat. Even a single sonar ping or misinterpreted signal could trigger a rapid response from opposing vessels. The psychological effect of knowing that hostile ships were nearby, potentially aware of the submarine's location, added an invisible but persistent layer of tension. Within these conditions, minor incidents often escalated into critical events. A misaligned valve, a brief lapse in monitoring, or a mechanical anomaly could propagate through interconnected systems. Crews were trained to anticipate, mitigate, and respond to such occurrences, but the cumulative stress of repeated exposure amplified both the likelihood and consequences of mistakes. Fatigue, noise, and confinement became factors that heightened risk over time. Prolonged missions created an environment in which human error and mechanical vulnerability intersected. Crew members slept in shifts, often in cramped bunks adjacent to engines or machinery. Noise, vibration, and heat made restful sleep difficult. Sustained operation in this context gradually eroded physical and mental resilience, while the constant awareness of danger maintained heightened vigilance. Each day under these conditions represented both routine and hazard simultaneously. The consequences of these pressures were recorded indirectly in historical accounts, logs, reports, and survivor testimony describe instances of minor equipment failures, emergency drills, and operational challenges. While these documents rarely convey the full intensity of experience, the surviving evidence within sunken submarines provides tangible traces: repaired bulkheads, scuffed floors, modified equipment, and the careful stowage of provisions. Each artifact is a testament to adaptation and endurance. Escalation also manifested in the human dimension of social hierarchy. Officers made decisions that affected not only mission success, but crew survival. Authority was exercised through protocol, training, and sometimes coercion. Subordinates internalized these structures, balancing obedience with initiative in situations where delay could prove fatal. The dynamics of hierarchy were amplified by environmental constraints. Small spaces, proximity, and constant observation reinforced discipline, but also intensified interpersonal stress. The cumulative effect of these pressures shaped the behavior, performance, and experience of the crew. Every task, every interaction, and every moment of rest was embedded within an ongoing calculus of survival. An operational necessity, the submarine itself became both protector and threat, simultaneously a controlled environment and a source. A potential catastrophe as the vessel descended into the depths. As its engines thrummed and as the crew carried out each task, the escalation of peril was constant, but incremental. It was the steady accumulation of risk, rather than a single dramatic event, that defined life aboard. Understanding this progression is essential for interpreting the discoveries within the sunken submarine, where every preserved object, structural, feature, and personal effect reflects the compounded pressures of environment, operation, and human endurance. By examining these factors, historians can reconstruct not only the technical and procedural aspects of submarine operations, but also the lived experience of the men aboard. The interplay of mechanical, environmental, and social stressors illustrates how escalation of risk shape both routine behavior and extraordinary events, providing a framework for understanding the narrative revealed by the wreck. This chapter marks the critical point at which the submarine's cumulative pressures, mechanical, environmental, and operational, intersected to create catastrophe. It examines the vessel's final moments, connecting preserved evidence to the human experience aboard and showing how the discovery illuminates the decisive moment in its loss. As missions extended and operational pressures intensified, the limits of both vessel and crew were tested repeatedly. The submarine's engineering, though advanced for its time, was not immune to fatigue, corrosion, or unforeseen environmental challenges. Pressure hulls, designed to withstand specific depths, faced repeated stress. Every dive added cumulative strain, and every maneuver risked compromising structural integrity. Even small miscalculations could set the stage for disaster. At the same time, the human element operated under relentless tension. Officers executed decisions with precision, aware that errors could have fatal consequences. Crew members, conditioned by training and experience, performed complex tasks within confined spaces, often while fatigued and under sensory stress. The balance between routine and risk was precarious, and small disruptions could escalate quickly. The turning point is evidenced both in historical context and in the physical state of the wreck. Analysis of damage patterns, deformations, and structural compromises indicates that the submarine experienced catastrophic failure while submerged. This failure was not sudden in the sense of unpredictability. It was the result of accumulated stress, operational hazard, and environmental pressure converging at a critical moment. The vessel's last moments were thus shaped by forces inherent to its design, mission, and environment. Within the submarine, crew reactions to escalating peril were dictated by protocol and instinct. Emergency procedures were initiated immediately. Upon detection of a critical malfunction or breach, hatches were sealed, ballast systems adjusted, and attempts were made to stabilize depth and orientation. Every action was calculated to preserve the vessel and its occupants, but conditions often exceeded capacity. The evidence within the wreck shows that crew members remained at their stations, performing duties to the end, constrained by both procedure and circumstance. Operational context magnified the stakes. Enemy presence, whether detected or anticipated, added an additional layer of urgency. Even in the absence of direct engagement, the possibility of external attack influenced decision-making, further compressing the window for error or improvisation. These intersecting pressures, mechanical, environmental, operational, and human, define the submarine's final sequence of events. Analysis of preserved objects within the wreck offers insight into the turning point. Instruments are frozen at positions corresponding to critical maneuvers. Valves, levers, and indicators suggest attempts to counteract flooding or stabilize depth. Personal items, undisturbed or displaced, reveal the human dimension. Crew members, interrupted in daily routines, their actions reflecting discipline, urgency, and awareness of imminent danger. The vessel thus becomes a time capsule, capturing the precise intersection of cumulative pressures and human response. Environmental factors played a decisive role. Depth, water pressure, and external conditions combined with mechanical vulnerabilities to create a scenario in which the vessel could no longer maintain integrity. Submerged for extended periods, the submarine had little margin for error. Minor failures, which might have been manageable on the surface or at shallower depth, became fatal under compounded strain. These conditions illustrate the delicate balance between engineering design and environmental reality in submarine operations. The physical layout of the vessel contributed to both vulnerability and response. Compartments were interdependent, and damage in one section could rapidly affect others. Crew members, trained to operate within these interdependencies, were constrained by spatial limitations even in emergencies. Escape options were limited, hatches and bulkheads could slow evacuation, and reliance on mechanical systems was absolute. This structural reality defined the final sequence of events. The turning point is also reflected in temporal compression. The final failure likely unfolded over minutes or seconds. Yet it was the inevitable outcome of a sequence of incremental stresses and decisions spanning days or weeks. Understanding this cumulative process allows historians to reconstruct events, not as a sudden catastrophe, but as the logical endpoint of prolonged operational, environmental, and human pressures. Discovery of the wreck transforms this understanding into tangible observation, structural deformations, sediment patterns, and the placement of artifacts corroborate historical expectations. They provide visual and material confirmation of a process that previously existed only in inference. Each observation contributes to a holistic comprehension of the vessel's final moments, bridging archival record and physical reality. The narrative at this stage shifts from potential to realization, where previous chapters examine context, conditions, and escalation. The turning point reveals the convergence of these factors in a decisive and irreversible event. The submarine, once an instrument of strategic action, becomes a locus of history frozen in time. Its discovery allows historians to witness this critical moment with a clarity unavailable in contemporaneous accounts by examining the interplay of mechanical failure, operational decisions, and environmental pressures. The turning point elucidates the boundaries of technology, endurance, and human resilience. The wreck serves as both evidence and teacher, demonstrating how structured systems, disciplined individuals, and environmental realities intersected in the final descent. This chapter concludes the narrative by examining what the discovery of the lost WWII submarine reveals about the vessel, its crew, and the broader context of naval warfare. It reflects on how the preserved wreck illuminates historical realities without sensationalizing events, providing closure to the story of its final mission. Once the submarine came to rest on the seafloor, it entered a new state, one of preservation, isolation, and eventual discovery. Encased in cold water and sediment, the vessel's structure remained largely intact, shielding it from complete decay and allowing subsequent generations to examine it. With a level of detail unimaginable at the time of its loss, the submarine became a silent archive, recording the mechanical, operational, and human conditions that define life aboard and ultimately the sequence of its final moments. The physical preservation of the wreck allows historians and researchers to reconstruct both routine and extraordinary aspects of the vessel's operation. Instrumentation, control panels, hatches, and torpedo mechanisms remain in positions that reflect their final usage. Bulkheads, passageways, and compartments retain evidence of spatial organization, operational design, and crew movement. Even minor personal effects tools, clothing, or stored provisions offer insights into daily life and the constrained routines that structured every moment aboard. Through careful study, the wreck provides a window into decision-making and procedural adherence under extreme circumstances. Officer stations, engine controls, and navigation equipment reveal the sequence of technical responses that attempted to mitigate the cumulative pressures of deep submersion, mechanical strain, and operational urgency. These observations transform what was once speculation into evidence-based understanding. Grounding historical analysis in material reality, the human dimension is equally compelling. The positions of objects and structural traces suggest how the crew performed their duties, adapted to environmental and mechanical constraints, and responded to escalating danger. The submarine's layout, in combination with preserved artifacts, offers indirect testimony to endurance, discipline, and the psychological burden of sustained isolation and risk. While individual voices remain silent, the traces they left behind resonate with the patterns of action, decision, and adaptation that define their experience. The wreck also contextualizes broader strategic and operational considerations, the mission objectives, environmental hazards, and mechanical limitations observed in the submarine illustrate the challenges inherent in wartime. Submarine service, depth constraints, limited communication, and enemy patrol patterns all contributed to operational decision-making and ultimately shaped the conditions that led to the vessel's loss. By studying these factors, researchers gain insight into the strategic calculus that governed submarine deployment. During the closing years of World War II, environmental preservation has turned the submarine into a time capsule, capturing the interface between human activity and technological design. Unlike documents or photographs, the physical state of the vessel provides multi-dimensional evidence. Sediment patterns, corrosion rates, and material displacement yield information about timing, sequence, and structural dynamics that complement archival research. The wreck thus serves as both a historical artifact and a source of empirical data, bridging gaps in the written record. The discovery's significance extends beyond technical and operational understanding. It offers an opportunity to confront the realities of life in a confined, high-pressure environment during wartime. It illustrates the interplay between human endurance, procedural discipline, and environmental challenge, demonstrating the ways in which ordinary individuals navigated extraordinary circumstances. Through the preserved structure and artifacts, the experiences of the crew are made tangible, allowing contemporary audiences to appreciate the complexities of their service. At the same time, the wreck reflects the impartiality of history. There are no embellishments or dramatizations in the cold steel and sediment. There is only evidence of function, procedure, and consequence. The submarine stands as a reminder of both the achievements and vulnerabilities of technology, as well as the resilience and limitation of human endurance under extreme conditions. In broader historical context, the discovery underscores the scale and complexity of submarine warfare in World War II. Each vessel operated within an intricate network of strategy, logistics, and tactical objectives, influenced by the evolving conditions of naval conflict. The lessons drawn from this particular wreck inform understanding of operational norms, engineering capabilities, and human behavior across the theater of maritime war. Finally, the submarine's discovery completes the narrative arc. The vessel, once a site of tension, decision, and ultimate failure, has become a source of knowledge and reflection. The transition from active deployment to submerged preservation. The modern discovery provides closure, illustrating how historical inquiry transforms objects of conflict into instruments of understanding. The story moves from uncertainty to revelation, from peril to interpretation, without sensationalism, maintaining a disciplined, historical perspective. The echo of the crew's experience persists through the preserved structure, artifacts, and spatial arrangement of the submarine. It offers insight into the realities of wartime life, the constraints imposed by technology and environment, and the cumulative pressures that define every moment below the waves. The vessel's discovery ensures that these lessons, while devoid of personal narrative in the traditional sense, continue to inform, educate, and bear witness to a pivotal aspect of World War II naval history. In conclusion, the submarine's journey from active service to final descent and subsequent discovery provides a comprehensive lens through which to understand the intersection of technology, human experience, and wartime strategy. Its preserved state allows for detailed study, bridging historical record and material evidence. As a silent witness to history, it embodies both the endurance and vulnerability of those who served, completing a narrative of tension, escalation, and resolution in the depths of the ocean, and offering a measured, factual account suitable for both historical scholarship and documentary storytelling.